We have a panel on powering the sports economy through innovation and inclusion with my sister, with Michelle Moore, who is a change agent, a published author, and all-around bad bee.
Thank you. It's great to be here amongst so many distinguished guests. I'm Michelle Moore. It's an honour to be addressing you today. First and foremost, I have to ask you to do something for me. Are you going to do it for me? I'm kind of trying to ask you to do something within like 3 seconds of knowing me. I want you to wordlessly stretch up with both arms. I want you to stretch and then turn to somebody and don't say anything and just smile with your eyes and with your mouth. That's it. That's it. Oh, and you laughed, right? Who was that person? Five press-ups at the front. Okay, hands down. Why did I do that? I wanted you to have a little movement because we need the blood to be flowing. We need oxygen in our blood to think and to hear. And we're going to go on a journey. I'm a sportswoman, so I'm going to keep this moving. I used to be a sprinter many years ago. But it is a real honour to address you. And much respect and congratulations to the Africa Soft Power team, to Nkiru, to Carol, to Nena, and to everybody that makes this special community happen. So we're going to go on this kind of, we're not doing a marathon, we're going to do like a 200 metres today. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about sport. And we're going to talk about the economy, the monetization. We're going to talk about sport for development, not just sports development. We're going to talk about sport for social integration, inclusive cultures, and technology and innovation. Does that sound okay? Right, let me just check. Who do we have in the room? Do we have people that love sport? Sports evangelists? Be honest, raise your hands. Okay, cool. Some good numbers. Do we have people that are footballers, who are participants, who are athletes, who are basketball players? Hands up. Oh, just a couple. Wow, what were tennis players? Okay, great. Do we have people that are not really that bothered about sport, but understand the power that it has? Everybody's hand should be up for this one. Everyone's hand should be up for this one. Sophie, your hand should be up, not on the phone. Okay, right, I got you. So we're going to talk about the cultural and the global presence that sport has, right? And we're going to do that from the perspective of what that means in terms of Africa and the soft and hard power that sport has and governs for us in terms of the sports ecosystem. And we have a very, very distinguished panel. Every time I'm on the continent, I'm always impressed with the amazing speakers that we have. And I am proud to be of Caribbean descent and a part of the historical diaspora of Africa and here with you today. And so, I'm going to, you know, I have very strong leadership style. It's not bossy, it's leadership. So what we're going to do, people, I'm going to very briefly introduce my distinguished panel, and then at the end, we're going to give a massive round of applause and some whoops. We're not going to do, you know, just polite clapping as we go along. Okay, is that a deal? So anybody that doesn't do that, anybody that claps at the wrong time, they're going to do some star jumps up here. Okay. So to start, we have an amazing panel with us today. We have Natasha, Camy. She is a powerhouse. Please join us. She is one of the very few do you want to do the star jumps, people? No. We're doing the clapping at the end. Oh, it's all gone wrong already. Natasha is an amazing powerhouse. She is a referee. She is the co-investor of the Cape Town Tigers, people. And she's also, they did lose last night. I didn't say that. Natasha just said that. And she's also the founder of the Referee Academy. We have Nkechi Obi, who is a senior executive with over 30 years experience working in Nigeria across the sports industry, looking at sport for development and really being a badass. Let me just be clear. We have Carl Schofield, who is the man of the moment. He is in charge of the arenas, the BK arenas. He does all of the work with the arenas and the NBA basketball. He is a powerhouse in this field. Big it up for Carl. And We have Michael Finley, who is from the NBA, who's spent time working across Africa, also his own sport for development organisation, and he's now based in Kenya, setting up the Kenyan office. Now, you are going to do a big whoops and a massive clap for my panel, people. There you go. So we got some energy going. I love it. I love it. We ready, people? Yeah, good. We need to, limber up. This is sport. All right. So if we kind of just get straight into it, and we think about the sports ecosystem and what it means, as you, Natasha, are a co-investor of a pro-African team. Talk to us about that intersection between the local stakeholders, the private investors, and the sports organisation in terms of transforming the impact of the African sports ecosystem.
Yeah. First of all, I just want to say thank you guys for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. Africa Soft Power, you guys do amazing work. So truly, congrats to you guys. To answer your question, it's so important that all the stakeholders that are involved with a team and building the area that they're from, that we involve the community, right? So for Cape Town Tigers, we're very focused on making sure that we involve all of South Africa, right? Joburg, Cape Town, all the areas. But, we know that basketball isn't necessarily the first sport, but we know that if we involve it from a grassroots perspective and that we get men involved, women involved, the community involved, we try to make sure that we have local artists when we do have games. We had one of the locations there this year with ball. We were granted that opportunity. And we made sure we had local talent. And then we had some of the local celebrities there, right? So that we bring it home. So it's just so important that when you're an investor, whether you're from the States where I'm from, or you're on the continent, or you're a local organization, that we serve the people, right? We're here to serve the people. We're here to make sure that everyone feels engaged, that they're welcomed. Our woman you just spoke about how important it is to make sure that we have everyone involved and that there are no barriers to entry, right? And so we want to make sure that the ticket prices are available, that we communicate to the respective audiences that might be available to that. And so doing that has got to be the first thing on your mind.
Thank you. And then Carl, just bringing you into that, in your role, leading the arenas, leading fan engagement, what do you see as the most important thing with all of that intersection?
I think Honourable Minister touched on it. We honestly sitting on a gold mine as it relates to sports in Africa, and it's the devices that people need to consume this content that we are producing. And I think if we as a collective can sort that issue out on getting devices into people's hands and having people consume the content, it'll change our sporting environment entirely. Money at the end of the day is what drives a lot of these things, and if we can figure that piece out, I think it'll be a different landscape for us across the continent. So from our perspective, as it relates to the venues and the infrastructure, why that is so critical is because content is king, and the better content that can come through our building just means that we have more of a model to prove across the continent. And so it's all this sort of chain reaction that comes into play. But for me, it starts with the gold mine, and that's the devices that need to get into people's hands.
And I know, Obi, that Nkechi, that you have some very clear thoughts around the values-driven aspect of sport and the asset that it has and how this relates to monetization and what Carl's just said.
I start off any conversation about sports with what exactly are we trying to achieve? Just before we came on, I was talking with Carl, and I was saying, Carl and I were kind of sharing ideas about the way we've been programmed to think of sports in Africa. The programming has made us think of sports in Africa from the perspective of the athlete, which in sheer business terms, when you're reading your annual report at the end of the year, you look at the part about depreciating assets. Your athletes are depreciating assets. But unfortunately for us here in Africa, we have always thought the athletes were the main assets for sport. Because of the change, the lifespan of an athlete, which, is not more than about 30, 35 years, an athlete sports is the only place you can have two careers. Therefore, the high turnover of athletes is the reason why the value of sports really is in those tangible assets that can appreciate. And that's what drives the development of the athlete. Unfortunately for us in Africa, we focus too much on the athlete. We don't have the venues, we don't have the facilities, we do not have the manufacturing capacity, we do not have the capacity development. There's a huge capacity gap as far as sports is concerned. So we find ourselves consuming, Carl spoke about consumption, consuming what mature markets have developed for us because they focused on the right things. They focused on the 80%. So for the first time, the conversation has started becoming about focusing on sports for development. Michelle mentioned sports for development. And sports for development is about infrastructure, it's about capacity development, it's about manufacturing, it's about the entire value chain that helps that athlete that is going to have a very short career to optimize that career and helps other athletes to come through the chain. Africa needs to begin to focus on sports for development, and that's where we are now.
It's so important, isn't it? It's such an integral point. Yeah, I think that deserves a clap, people, because, you know, as I was preparing for today, I was thinking, oh gosh, it's 57 days to the Olympics. I must mention that. But actually, sport is so much more than the Olympics, which is every 4 years, right? But as a former athlete, I'm like, my world was about that in all sorts of ways. But really what you're saying is it's what's behind that. And just bringing you in here, Michael, if that's okay. I know we've just met Michael. But the thing about, you know, you're setting up the new NBA offices in Kenya. What are your thoughts around this, the sport for development angle, the whole values asset piece that we're talking about here?
I think, look, sport to me, I came to Africa almost 30 years ago. And immediately, you know, back then we were saying, those of us that came here early were saying that, you know, Africa is the largest, it's by far the largest talent pool for the game of basketball in the world. And, you know, I always use the example of African Americans. We're less than, or just over 10% of the population of the United States. We're more than 70+% of the NBA. So it's just simple math. When you talk about starting a business in a country and looking at the sport for development, for us, Kenya is a great example where you have, on the ground, you have more basketball happening in Kenya than you have in most African countries, yet, you know, Kenya is not yet representing the continent in the under 16, the under 18, et cetera. And it's because of a few fundamental levers that need to be sort of adapted or adjusted to get the game and what I call the industry of the sport off the ground. And so, you know, for development, it's Africa will never educate its youth, the number of youth that need to be educated. There will never be enough jobs. Sport for development of young people, for development of human beings, and for the development of industries, businesses, is critical, I think, for the African continent. And I don't think there's ever been a better time than now.
Thank you.
Yes, just to buttress what Michael has just said, when the conversation always starts off, and what Michelle said, she spent all her career preparing for the Olympics. The Olympics is only important to the athlete. The athlete is the only one that has value from an Olympic medal. His community does not really have value, except to say, oh, maybe I want to be like that. And then the country says, oh, we want 2 gold medals, 3 gold medals. But in terms of real, and pardon me, I'm an Igbo woman. So when all is said and done, it's about naira and kobo. So, and dollars and cents. But the way we need to look at the way other economies are beginning to look at sports, particularly the consumption of sports that Carl touched on. We are consuming sports differently. We're consuming sports on a small device that enables us to see everything that's happening anywhere in the world. But on the continent, we are not consuming the sport that we are producing because the quality of the product that we have is low. So people are voting with their pockets to consume what has been better produced. You are right, basketball is played at very high levels, at across all levels in Kenya, but there isn't a product that the average Kenyan can watch on his phone. In Nigeria, every street corner on a Sunday plays football. Every street corner. I'm known to have stopped on the road and watched street football. Yes, I park and I watch some really talented young men.
Are you a
and
scout
women.
now as well?
You
You
know,
need to
and
add that to
I'm
your,
there
to your
marveling.
resume. Okay.
I'm there marveling.
Okay, you're
But
marveling.
there is no product. Our league cannot be consumed on my phone because the product has not been fully developed for that. So how do we sell what we don't consume is the question we should ask ourselves.
And if we think about that and think about the monetization of that, because actually that actually goes back to investment. It goes back to Aaron's, amazing panel about where is the money. I can't say it in the American accent. I'm just saying it in my South London drawl, people.
I can always help you with that.
Where's the money?
Do you want to do it?
Where's the money?
There you go, people. So, Natasha, I'll ask you that question then. If you, from your perspective as somebody that has set up your own academy, you've seen the lack of black female role models as referees, you're pioneering a game changer right here on this panel in all kinds of ways. So, if I said to you, what are the barriers that you've experienced on that kind of micro level and then relate it to that macro level in terms of money and investment?
Yeah, for me, being in the States, I'm considered a large woman, which obviously a lot of us are shaped the same in this room, right? Not speaking for everyone, obviously. But for my job, there's certain criterias that are implicit bias, my hair, my size, my skin tone. Sometimes the way that I carry myself, it's a confident person. Sometimes they want us to be timid, but the job entitles us to be more commanding. And so, these are things that I had to overcome mentally and emotionally, and knowing that the job that I wanted to do was important, but also people who look like me, I want them to have that opportunity as well. And the equity that you get from doing my job, it's a very well-paying job if you can do it at a very high level. So the way that they keep us out is having these pretend barriers that we don't know about because they don't allow enough of us in there. And so for me, it's so important to tell my story and to bring people behind me that look like me because we deserve access to that level of cash, that level of accessibility. And so, thank you. I just feel so passionate about that. I've been in a lot of rooms where no one looks like me. They're not even close to my story or my experience. And so, starting where I am, I always feel like if we do our part, wherever you are in your life, then you can expand to a macro level, right? And so, all of us up here, we represent different ethnicities and backgrounds and journeys, but us being up here together shows that we can do this together and that we can cover the world, truly.
It's such an important point there you make about collaboration, right? And then coalescing around the shared agenda. And that inclusion agenda is so important. But fundamentally, we still need to figure out that where the power dynamic is and where the money resides. And I'm going to come to you, Carl, and ask you, as a man in charge, as a man with power, and as a man that and I'm not laughing, I'm deadly serious, as a man that is able to, bring the NBA to 23 countries across the continent, what are your views around the monetization aspect?
Yeah, again, it's something that you mentioned as you were talking. I think the connection across the continent is so critical. I look at the African continent as one country. I really dislike the fact that we are divided as a continent, which is really, in my view, one of the biggest challenges. What we're doing as a business, and I was fortunate enough to work with the NBA, traverse the entire continent, got to understand there is infrastructure. There's a problem in the management of infrastructure. There's a problem in the commercialization of infrastructure. There's a problem with the mindset of what infrastructure is in the sporting realm. But one fundamental piece that I saw as a challenge is that we are handicapped to a certain extent with these borders that we continuously have to face. And I look at it with promoters that do a great job in South Africa in touring South Africa, but that's as far as it goes. To bring them into Rwanda to perform in our venue, to then take them to Kenya or to Ghana, Senegal, you're probably sitting with maybe 60% of that going to taxes that, each country you have to dive into and pay your tax and then move to the next country, pay your tax. And so for us as a business, I think a big element of monetization comes out of connectivity and partnership. And if we can establish strategic partnerships in the sporting realm, what we can ultimately do is form a platform for our artists, for our sports people to perform at the highest level, for fans to engage personally with our athletes and our entertainers, and for the business side of it, the back end of it, to actually happen and perform and create a business environment that then goes on to impact a wider community. We look at our venue on a daily basis here in the BK Arena. We've got about 100 people that work every single day at the venue. But I can tell you, our impact across the country is over 15,000 jobs that we actively impact, because you've got sound, you've got social media, you've got cleaning staff, security, and it's an ongoing thing. We've created that economy, and I tell you, we are probably operating at 30% at this point. If we can unlock our borders and unlock our ability to really partner, no one will touch us.
Okay, so in addition to what he's just said, that connectivity can only happen when we're all seated in a room, everyone concerned, from the highest to the lowest people, the biggest stakeholders, and asking ourselves what are the challenges. So sometime, and I'm going to use my example, so sometime in 2022, after about 7 years of serious work, we finally managed to get the Nigerian government to pass what we called the sports industry policy. We've always had a sports policy, but it had to do with athletes. So every time it was just about how many gold medals, how many this. There was never anything about business. But for the first time, the business aspect was looked at. 10 key business areas, policy thrust areas were looked at. The minute that was passed, my organization realized that somebody needed to make the conversation go beyond our borders. Why? Because we got calls from all over Africa saying there had never been a sports industry policy in any African country. So when those calls came in, we realized, okay, let's have a platform like Carl is talking about, where we can talk about sports for development. How do we create jobs? You just mentioned 15,000 indirect jobs. Our sports policy called for 3 million direct jobs and 5 million indirect over a 10-year period. How can we have a platform across Africa that addresses the issue of investment, that addresses the issue of capacity, that addresses the issue of manufacturing, that leverages after the African Free Trade Agreement to unlock those value chain parts? And we'll come to that a bit later.
Absolutely. And that touches on the sports for development goals as well, in terms of sustainable growth of the industry. But if I bring you in, Michael, and think about some of the broader issues around, technology and innovation and inclusion, from your experience, what do you see as some of the opportunities and threats? And then I'm going to open that up to Natasha to speak as well.
Well, I think I was going to use the what many of you may be able to attend this week, our league, the Basketball Africa League, as an example, talking about the economic benefits of sport, and then what I've seen from being inside the NBA and having, prior to joining the NBA, worked sort of from the bottom up to develop the game on the continent. What the BAL has done, as an example, it has created an entire, not only creating the ecosystem, but more importantly, because the NBA can't fund everything, but more importantly, what it's done is sort of the rising tides raises all ships. So what I'm seeing in Kenya, in multiple countries, governments, investors, they're talking about building arenas. They want to follow the example that Rwanda has built. And now we have the ambassador for that, which is Claire Akamanzi, who is our new CEO, who did the deal with the NBA here, with the BAL, which has brought the BAL here. What has that done? That has created or individuals, investors are built, or they're investing in teams across the continent. Now you have teams emerging. You have a lot of young people that are creating their own events. You have leagues in the different countries that are now kind of rising. And what the NBA has done by making this big investment in sport, what's happened is the NBA has created this demand. So I've seen more sponsors who are sort of just peeking in, pulling the curtain back and saying, what's going on with basketball? And they're willing to get in. We just did a deal this week in Kenya with Safaricom, where we're about to do development across the country. That could have never really happened on that scale 5, 6, 7 years ago, because it's just like this thing that basketball is niche. So now the last point is that innovation and technology around the game. So we just launched something called the Triple Double Accelerator. We announced it at the AmCham Summit a few weeks ago in Kenya. And what is that? That is, how do we open up a portal for tech startups in Africa, to help us solve problems around the BAL, things around ticketing, fan engagement, and around our overall business. We've got over 200 applicants, companies, African companies that have applied to do this, and we're going to identify 10 of them at the UN General Assembly in September. And so it's the way that it has opened up an entire ecosystem. Just this one big investment by the NBA, I think, speaks to a great model of how this can drive business, drive sport, and create industries around sport in Africa.
That's such an important point, isn't it? It's the unlocking, and it's something that connects all of the panels that we've been talking about today in terms of that connectivity. And Natasha, you kind of gave us your journey a bit, but what's impressive about Natasha is she's not just a role model, she's a real model. I like to talk about real role models that talk about how it is, that lead the way. And I know that you noticed a gap. You knew there wasn't training and development around the capacity building that Nkechi spoke so eloquently about for referees, and you did something about it. What did you do?
Yeah, actually, me and Mike were talking about it because, there with refereeing, just to give you a little bit of insight, you get trained to be a referee, so like book-wise, right? Okay, you know where to stand, whatever. But just like if you're doing anything in music or anything in sport, you have to actually practice it. And so for us, it's like we have all these referees who are trained referees, but have they actually refereed? No. So how do we fill that gap? And I saw that in the States where, we had a gap of women, we had a gap of people of color, we had a gap of Black people just in general. And like I was talking about just the equity that's available there, I was like, how do I get, our people from point A to point Z, because as the games are going, you're expecting these people to do at a high level. And as the games get better and the continent gets stronger, and these games have been phenomenal, if you guys have had a chance to watch, it's incumbent on us to make sure that we fill that gap. And so for me, I like to be a problem solver, just like everyone on the stage. And I felt like, what can I do at least where I am, where I can get my people involved? So I started Referee Ready to ensure that everyone that joins at least has the basis of how do you actually referee a real-time game? What's the feedback? We have an app that we give people critical data on, and we also give them notes on so they can use that when they go home. And then we do a 365 where we do virtual trainings, summits like this, and we have experts, mental health experts come in and talk to them about what the mental component is about being under pressure and making sure that we serve the game in a very high standard.
Amazing stuff. So I'm just going to take a pause there and check in with you as my audience and to welcome Your Highness to the proceedings.
Yes.
Any questions? I can see you're all wrapped. So oh, yes, my brother, I can see your hand is up. Can I ask you to ask a question and to keep it super short? So yes, we're going to get a mic to you. I think someone's going to, okay, yeah, Nana's going to get the mic. Oh, there you go. Can you stand up, say your name, keep it super short, because I'm really strong on my leadership, so I'll be lovingly, meaningfully just cutting you.
Strict regime.
Okay, good.
All right, Paul, attorney. I work in the sports economy here in Rwanda. So my question is about, earlier they touched on something about focusing on athletes, but how you've actually talked about a gap in terms of having a skilled workforce that can fill in the gaps, both in career opportunities, but also entrepreneurship that attracts investment to the region. But all that revolves around building capacity. So what has been your experience harmonizing all these programs that are happening in the private sector in terms of capacity building. How have you harmonized getting them validated?
Thank you. Great. Super short-ish. Go for it, Nkechi.
All right. So, listening to Natasha also reminded me of some of the challenges we faced. The gender issue is not only as far as refereeing is concerned, coaching, management, leadership, ownership. I'm very glad that you're a co-owner of the Cape Town Tigers. Look, this is unusual, very unusual. Women hardly get the chance to do this, but there has to be a way. I wear two hats sitting here. I'm the CEO of Sport Nigeria, but I'm also the chairperson of the Nigerian Women's Football League. And when I got in there last year, after 32 years of operation, we had only one female coach for 16 clubs, for about 30 clubs. One female coach. In fact, last week was our Super Six, and I was really deeply saddened to see that the 6 teams that qualified had no female coach, just men. So I was watching the men overseeing. I'm not knocking the men, but to coach women requires a woman. So here's what we decided to do. We decided that there must be a pathway to coaching for women, so that in the next 5 years, at least 50 coaches must come through. There must be a pathway for refereeing. The refereeing thing is a bit more difficult in the sense that you have 10 stages to go through. But in the next 10 years, we must be able to produce 200 female referees.
I'm lovingly quickening you up to
Yes,
answer
and
the
then
question.
all that requires us to get the investment. We cannot get the investment if we do not put a plan to put women football, I'm using women football at the very highest. So that plan is in place. It's called Women's Football Rising, and hopefully we'll be able to
Thank
get what we
you.
want.
And I'm just going to ask Carl just to respond to that question as well, the harmonising of all of those different aspects that our brother talked about there.
Perfect. I'll answer the question. I also want to throw in one more point into this hat of monetization. But as it relates to training and capacity building, we have a real gap across the continent with regards to skills for the business of sport. And so from our viewpoint, we look at it in 3 ways. It's training, practical experience, and exposure. And I think I'd highlight the point on exposure because it is amazing what it can do to a person if they are able to see something happen that they have learned, that they have in some way been taught. To actually see it happen changes everything. And so we focus on those 3 fundamentals. And as a business, what we're actively establishing is called a Backstage Academy. And that's focused on training people around all the expertise that are required for our industry to thrive. So that's how we approach it. The point I wanted to add, and it's very cliche in today's world, but I wanted to just share the way I look at it and how I think from a continent perspective, we specifically for sports, we need to really start understanding it, is the data. Data is so critical. I always give this example, we were just talking. If you go into Google at the moment, you can search up mining, you can search up agriculture, you will get a million links of information and data about how to go and build a mining company or where the mines are situated, anything that you need to start a business. And again, the magic in being able to take someone who is really passionate about being a business person and give them some sort of information is a game changer. You go on Google and you say, what is the sports industry in Africa? You won't get much. So there's a real data point that we need to play our part in fulfilling and sharing. You know, I always say to people, we are the only private company in Africa doing what we are doing. And every time people ask me to come and share the story, I say with pleasure. Because if someone can stand up and say, I want to do that business, perfect. The more competition, the more data, the better we'll be.
Thank you. Any other questions from the floor?
Wonderful. My name is June Gashui from Nairobi, Kenya. My question to all of you is around the sustainability. You've all referenced the fact that it is a short career. So I'm wondering where the school education system comes in terms of being able to bring the pool of these sportsmen and women and the people who can do the business of sport into the ecosystem much earlier.
Started doing youth programs in the townships of South Africa in the late 90s. And one of the things that I realized in terms of answer your question about the school system, and I think Africa has an issue with this because I've seen it across countries in communities where I've gone. If you look at high school sport in America, it's driven by the parents. There's a basic infrastructure that's in place, but it's the parents. If you become a parent, you might be the coach, you might be running the concessions, you might be running the fundraising for the team. You might be a referee, et cetera. And I think one of the things that I think that's what drives high school sport or school sport in places like the United States. And I think that from a sustainability standpoint, which is critical, and something it keeps me up at night actually, because in Kenya we're launching a high school program. I'm concerned about the sustainability because once the sponsor is gone, how does that program continue to run without someone coming in and funding everything? And in the U.S., it's parents. It's parents that drive it. And how do we get to that? I think that's one of the critical factors that has to improve. And it's what works in other parts of the world. And I don't know what will supplant that here. But that will be my answer to that question.
Thank you. And straight here.
Yeah. So my question is hopefully very quick. I think it's mostly for you, Michael, but anybody can answer, I suppose. The NBA Africa, league is kind of splashy and people are looking at it globally. I know that the revenue mix and the monetization mix looks a certain way in the US, right? So ticket sales, concessions, merchandise, broadcast rights. How do your expectations for revenue mix and monetization in general in Africa look relative to that? And how does that change how you think about developing the league and working with partners and making this sustainable so more investors can come in?
That's a great question. I think we're another thing that's keeping us up at night is the monetization model of the league, right? Because it's not developed enough to get media deals that drive it like in the United States. And it's a slow grind to get enough sponsors involved. We have a unique situation here in Kigali where, great sponsorship, great support. But outside of that, in other countries, it's tough. I think that it's something that we are trying to figure out now. And I think we are looking at how does it move towards a model that's more similar to the current NBA model where, because one of the things about it is I'm telling people all the time, if you come to Kigali for this finals, it changes your perspective on African basketball forever. Because what's
100%.
happened here is unbelievable. 10,000 people, another few thousand in the fan zone, concessions, it's just like an NBA game, just slightly smaller. Now, how do you replicate that? The only way to replicate that is there's got to be facilities in Nigeria. There's got to be facilities in Kenya. There's got to be home and away games so that I know that as a non-fan, I'm like, oh, I got to catch that next week. It's coming back. That's the only way that it's going to get there. Right now, this model has kind of broken the seal, and it's opened people's eyes and opened the door to like what can be. But it has to be. We're constantly looking at to figure out how do we get there. It's got to be home and away. It's got to be more venues that'll drive the TV deals. That'll drive it's on your phones now, probably moving forward, and that'll drive the sponsorship deals. But that's a great question.
Thank you. And I'm going to just stop there because we have literally under 2 minutes to go. I want to end with one last word from each of you, and this can be on your key reflection from what you've heard today. And I think what's important about our convening sometimes is that we get to really riff with other people in an unlikely way, just as we were having a conversation before. So just your big key takeaway that you'd like to share with the audience. And I'm going to start with Natasha.
Okay. I think for me, the biggest key from everyone today is just how passionate everyone is about how important it is to collaborate, right? And finding ways to make sure that the money stays in Africa and that we grow Africa's pool of not just officials, but management. Business management is so key to growing the sport in any sport that we have. And I think that everyone up here is committed to that, and everyone out here is also committed to that. But like all of us have been saying, how can we do this together, and how can we make actual change?
For me, the biggest takeaway from this is what I've always believed anyway. There must be a meeting point for conversations about sport. There's a meeting point for conversations about the creative industry, that's Canex. There's a meeting point for film industry. There's a meeting point for mining. There's a meeting point. There's never been a meeting point for Africa to sit down and talk about sports. We're glad to be able to provide that platform.
Thank you. And I know you have your event coming up in November as well, so thank you so
yes,
much.
So for about 5 minutes after we're done, I'll take you through what that event is.
Outside of the panel. Great. Thanks,
Yes.
Nkechi. Carl, you're like 20 seconds.
I see we got 1 second left. So
Yeah.
Mike's not speaking, huh?
No, he is.
This is-
This is about equity.
Mike's getting out of it.
I know you love Mike. You go way back. He is speaking. This is my stage.
That's super. I was having a conversation with a very good friend of mine a few days ago, and we discussed the whole concept of what is your why. And I think for us across the continent, I think I'm safe to say everyone in this room is dedicated to the development of Africa. But you have to understand your why, because there's times where things get very tough. There's times where the output of what you're doing and the return is very much lopsided. And the only way you're going to maintain and keep pushing and keep driving is understanding why you're doing that. That question, we discussed it at length with a group of people, and it really shifted my mindset quite a bit. And made me realize that I was understanding my why throughout this entire process of starting a business, through COVID, through everything. It's that why that keeps you going.
Thank you. And finally, but not least, you, Michael. I'm giving you 25 seconds, Michael, because what Carl said.
Yeah, just first of all, thank you for, stepping in and giving me my voice. I think what I would say is, look, Africa, I said it earlier, in all sports. I see it in basketball in particular, but it's all sports. Africa is by far the largest talent pool in the world. Sport is a multi-billion-dollar industry everywhere on the planet, except where the largest talent pool exists. And it's just, my takeaway is that I can see that that's changing. So many people are committed to it. We're conscious about it. And I think, the future is bright, for Africa in sport. And that just makes me smile.
Thank you so much to our esteemed panel. Weren't they fabulous? We covered so much in a short space of time, and I want you to really look these people up. They're change makers in their field, and we're very, very grateful to you for your insight and your wisdom today, each and every one of you. Thank you so much. You've been a wonderful audience. We're going to have our photos taken now, and I know we're going to keep this moving. So thank you very much. Another big clap for my wonderful panel.